right? And got a chance to review the documentation that I had sent yesterday.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's kind of get started with a little more advanced topics on S3 today. I'm just going to share my screen. Just give me a second. I'm just going to bring up my account and then share my screen. So in the meantime, quick questions. What is the durability SLA of S3?
11 nines.
9.
11 nines. Okay, excellent. What is the maximum size limit that you can store in S3?
5 TB.
Listen to my
terabyte.
question very clearly. What is the maximum size limit that you can store in S3? What is the maximum data volume size limit that you can store in S3?
5 terabytes.
5 GB.
5 GB?
Exabyte.
5 TB? 5 TB is the maximum data you can store in S3? You can't store beyond 5 TB?
Unlimited.
Unlimited, yes, it's unlimited. It's not limited. The maximum size of an object can be up to 5 TB. Okay, the maximum size of any file can be up to 5 TB. But the volume of data that you can store in S3 is literally unlimited. Okay, there's no limit to that. Okay, all right. And can you use S3 for your operating system drive?
No.
No,
Yes.
sir.
You can't, because it's an object storage. It's not a block storage. It's an object storage. Okay, excellent. So let's get started with today's thing. So today also we're continuing on S3, but a little more advanced topics on S3. Okay, so one is first thing what we're going to see is how do we protect data on S3? Okay, so the data protection on S3 is basically using multiple different mechanisms and multiple different features that AWS offers for data protection on S3. Let me open the blog. This gentleman has written it very well. He has summarized it very well. Amazon S3 data protection. Okay, Amazon S3 provides a data protection using highly durable storage, which means your data will be there for, I mean, you can ensure that, you can be assured that your data is going to be durable for 11 nines, 99.9999 11 nines. Okay, so that way it's going to be highly durable. You don't have to worry about loss of any data, and you don't have to worry about any corruption of your data and things like that, because as I said, AWS manages multiple versions of S3, the object that you store in multiple availability zones. So that's how it's able to quickly restore if if one copy of the object goes bad, it can quickly restore it from the other copy. Okay, and objects are redundantly stored on multiple devices across multiple facilities in an S3 region. Okay, and also there's something called eventual consistency within S3. We'll see about that. So where the S3 put operations and put object copy operations synchronously store the data across multiple facilities before returning success. So as I said yesterday, every S3 operation is an API based operation, right? Every S3 is an API, right? It only uses an API to make those operations of get, put, post, and all of that. Yeah, again, I spoke about this objects. Once the objects are stored, S3 maintains its durability by quickly detecting and repairing any lost redundancy. Okay. And also, S3 regularly verifies the integrity of the data stored using checksums. Okay. Like I was talking about the E tag, right? Every object has got a E tag. E tag is nothing but kind of a checksum that you have for normal files. Okay, so that if the contents of the file has been modified or the file gets corrupted, the E tag also changes accordingly. So that way, it regularly verifies the integrity of data using checksums, so that if there are any data corruption issues, it is quickly repaired using redundant data. Okay, and data protection against accidental overwrites and deletions can be added by enabling versioning to preserve, retrieve, and restore every version of the object stored, right? We looked at versioning, right? How versioning works. S3 also provides the ability to protect data in transit as it travels to and from S3 and at rest while it is stored in S3. So by default, when you upload an object to S3, it uses HTTPS protocol, which uses a SSL certificate behind the scenes. Okay, HTTPS is secure HTTP, right? So that way there is an SSL that is used, certificate that is used to encrypt the data that is originating from the user's workstation or the client. When it till the time it reaches the server, it is completely protected. And once it reaches the server uses the same key to decrypt the data, and then it stores it within the storage. Okay, that is the in transit. That is like data protection in transit. So you guys should clearly understand this, right? This is an interview question, right? So where you will be asked what are the different ways of mechanisms of protecting your data. So you should say that it is data is either protected in transit or at rest. Okay, in transit is while it is being transmitted from source to destination. Okay, on the way, right? I mean, for example, from here I'm sending my data to I'm uploading my data into Mumbai S3 bucket. So now it has to go till Mumbai, right? I mean, it has to reach till Mumbai through the wire. So in transit, if somebody tries to capture my data and then somebody tries to change it, they won't be able to, because it's encrypted. I mean, they'll only see some random characters, they won't see the actual data. So they won't be able to reconstruct the package even if they get hold of it, because the key is not there with them. The private key which is used to decrypt the data is not there with them. Okay, they may only, because it's how the SSL encryption works or the key encryption works is it's a private key public key pair, right? Public key will be there with everybody, right? Like once you go, even if you see this site, it has an SSL. Okay, if you see, it's a connection secure, and it has a certificate that is there, right? I mean, this is the certificate issued. This is the certificate that is issued to this person. Okay, this website. So now using this certificate, it has the public key. Okay, so now using the public key, the data gets encrypted. But in order to decrypt it, you need a special key called private key. So only using the private key you can decrypt the data. Using the public key, you won't be able to decrypt the data. So that's the public key, private key, based encryption. Okay, so now the data in transit is encrypted because by default HTTPS is being used. It is encrypted and it is sent to S3. And at rest, after reaching S3, after it gets stored inside the disk, even then it is also encrypted, right? There you can specify encryption policies, right? I mean, what sort of encryption you want for the data that you're storing in S3, because the data is going to lie there for maybe for years together, correct? And for several regulatory compliance reasons, you might want to encrypt the data so that even if somebody gets hold of the data, they won't be able to use the data without having the key to decrypt the data. Okay, on the disk it gets encrypted. okay, while being stored in the disk. That is called at rest. Okay, now let's look at data in transit. S3 allows protection of data in transit by enabling communication via SSL or using client-side encryption. See, there are two ways in which you can encrypt the data. One is through the SSL. SSL is secure socket layers. Okay, so now again, SSL is an important interview question, right? I mean, what is SSL? Please read this. What is SSL? Right, you will see a lot of uh, articles about what an SSL means, right? It's an important question. And what is SSL handshake means? Okay, SSL handshake. You need to know the process of SSL handshake, end-to-end process of SSL handshake. Okay, so you guys should understand this. Okay, why don't we do one thing? Um, why don't a few of you, prepare on, or a couple of you prepare on what an SSL handshake is and present it to the rest of the team in one of our subsequent sessions. You will have about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, right? Prepare, maybe prepare a set of slides, maybe 4 to 5 slides, or if you find a nice blog that explains it, you can also use the blog to explain or do some whiteboarding session and then explain it to the rest of the team. Okay, so who knows SSL handshake? Who knows how the SSL handshake works? Can raise your hands. Okay, okay, Z011. Okay, great, excellent. Z011. So, will you be able to present it to the rest of the class? Maybe sometime, maybe on Thursday or Friday. Yeah, maybe on Friday. Why not? Or even on Saturday. Okay, you have to unmute Z011. Okay, you're not quite audible. Your voice is breaking. Okay, I can't hear you. Okay, maybe his line is bad. Okay, let's do. I heard Saturday. Did I hear Saturday?
I'll explain one.
Okay.
Saturday,
Okay.
Saturday.
Saturday. Okay, great. Or you can just ping me one. Okay. Okay, cool. So now we have somebody volunteering to teach all of us what an SSL and SSL handshake is all about. Okay, good, cool. Okay, so now you can use SSL to encrypt the data for data in transit, data at rest. So S3 supports both client-side encryption and server-side encryption for protecting the data at rest, right? See, if you're having some data, right, you have a file. You can actually encrypt your file before even you upload it to S3. Okay, like what happens is you have a file and you want to ensure that you don't want to trust even AWS for that matter, right? So you can use your own algorithm to encrypt the data and then upload it to S3. Number one. Number two, you upload your data to S3. So while you upload the data, it is secure because it gets encrypted. But once it reaches the S3's end using SSL, it gets again decrypted. Okay, but before storing it onto the disk, you can again encrypt it. Okay, when it is stored in the disk, you can again encrypt it using server-side encryption. So that is called server-side encryption. Okay, using server-side encryption, S3 encrypts the object before saving it on disks in its data centers and decrypts it when the objects are downloaded. Okay, using client-side encryption, data is encrypted at client side and uploaded to S3. In this case, the encryption process, the encryption keys, and related tools are managed by the user. AWS can't manage it. You have to use your own encryption methodology, encryption keys, and all the other tools to basically decrypt the data when you after you download it. Okay, so that's the difference between a server-side encryption and client-side encryption. Okay, so now with server-side encryption. Uh, Encrypts only the object data, right? Okay, basically what it does is whatever you store, right? I mean, in this case, yesterday we stored hello RPL champs, right? It basically encrypts that data like this. Yeah, so you have this. So it says, so this is the object, correct? This is what the content says. After it encrypts, it will be something like this. Random characters. It will be like this. So you won't be able to make sense out of it, right? Unless you decrypt it. Okay. So that you have to basically, so now in this case, encrypts only the object data, not the object metadata. Like it does not encrypt the name, owner, and things like that, right? And S3 handles the encryption as it writes it to the disks and decrypts when objects are accessed of the data objects. There is no difference in the access mechanism for both encrypted and unencrypted, and this is handled transparently by S3. I mean, in this case, the user doesn't have to really worry about it, right? You just select the encryption and leave it. S3 takes care of it. Even if you don't encrypt certain buckets, that's okay. At the end of the day, S3 handles it alike. Okay, so now there are multiple ways in which you can handle the server side encryption. Okay, the first encryption is using managed keys, right? Using the server side encryption using S3's managed keys, right? So now what is a key, right? I mean, when you want to encrypt certain data, you need a key, correct? So you have to use that key to decrypt it, encrypt it, and decrypt it, correct? So now in AWS, there is something called KMS, Key Management Service. So using Key Management Service, you will be able to create new keys, okay, rotate those keys and use those keys for other services. Like you can use KMS extensively within S3. You can use it for EBS. You can use it for DynamoDB. You can use it for RDS. Okay, so many services within AWS supports KMS. Okay, they're all integrated with each other. So from that perspective, there are different ways in which you can manage the keys, right? So one, what you can do is you can just leave the key management part to AWS itself, right? You don't have to worry about create those keys and manage the life cycle of those keys. So in such cases, you choose server side encryption with S3 managed keys, where AWS will manage those keys for you. You don't have to worry about the keys. Okay, that's called S3 managed keys, where uh, SSC S3 encrypts the data with a master key that is regularly rotated, and S3 manages those keys. You don't have to worry about it. Okay. What S3 does is S3 server-side encryption uses one of the strongest block ciphers available, which uses a 256-bit AES. Okay, it's called Advanced Encryption System. Okay, 256-bit to encrypt the data. So the cipher is kind of quite strong. Usually what happens is there's something called brute force attack, right? So now using brute force attack, nobody will be able to generate the key for it and be able to decrypt it. Okay, so now if you see passwords, right? Why the best practice says that you always have to use strong passwords, because there are different types of attacks that are possible, right? So where they can guess, right? So where they can guess the passwords and they can basically run a brute force where they will keep trying the passwords, and then eventually one password will work out. They'll use that password to break into your system, right? But here in this case, it's not going to be possible because the cipher that is being used is quite strong, right? And it uses a 256 AES 256 to encrypt the data. Okay. Okay. So that's for S3 managed keys, where you don't have to manage the life cycle of the key. But if you feel that, okay, I don't trust S3 also, right? In this case, I will only manage my keys, where when I store data onto S3, I will use my own keys to encrypt the data while the data is stored at rest. Okay, at rest is it is actually being stored. In transit is it is moving. Okay, these are the two standard terminologies all of you have to understand, right? And you have to use these terminologies, during interviews, like data encryption in transit, data encryption at rest, in transit and at rest. Okay, so now if you feel that you have to use your own keys, then you can go for key management service, right? KMS. So where you can use server-side encryption with the AWS key managed service, where you create a key for yourself in your account, okay, using KMS, where you have master keys in your customer's account, which is your account, and you use that encrypted key to you use that encryption key to encrypt your data in your S3. Okay, it's very similar to SSE S3. In SSE S3, it uses the key that is managed by AWS. You don't have to manage the lifecycle of the key, but in KMS, you have to manage the lifecycle of the key. Okay, and this is also highly secure, right? So where but the only difference is you have to manage the life cycle of the key, and you have to ensure that you rotate the keys properly, and you keep changing those keys, and you ensure that you store those keys in a very secure it's anyway stored, it's going to be stored within KMS only, right? But you need to ensure that the access to KMS is restricted, so that no one else will be able to go to KMS and delete those keys or misuse those keys. Okay. Yes, that's the advantage of going with a server-side encryption and KMS. Okay, so now this is server-side encryption with customer-provided keys, right? So here, as I said, you don't have to trust AWS at all completely. So before even you send the data to AWS, you want to basically, uh, encrypt the data. That is also possible. That is like client-side encryption. But you can also use your own keys, right? For example, in your enterprise, you have your own encryption software, which already has a key and which is a very strong key, and you want to use that key, you can also import that key into KMS, and you can use that for encryption. You don't have to generate the keys through AMS. Okay, that is also possible. Okay, I'm just going to skip some of these. Okay, I'm going to actually show you some examples. Okay, let me just go create a bucket. My RPL bucket, 10th November, hyphen 10th November, Mumbai, yeah, block all public access. I'll just enable versioning. Yeah, so if you see here, server side encryption, if you disable it, I mean, your data that is stored on S3 storage goes unencrypted. It won't be encrypted while it is being stored on the disk at S3's end, at AWS's end. But if you enable it, you will get an opportunity to select what sort of key that you want to use. You want to go with a key that is provided by Amazon, or you want to use the key that you want to control using KMS. Yeah, again, KMS is a key management service. If you just select this and type KMS, you will see KMS here. Okay, here you can just go ahead and you can create a key here. You can create a symmetric or asymmetric key. Okay, asymmetric key is a single encryption key that is used for both encryption and decryption operations. Asymmetric is a public private key pair. Usually SSL is an asymmetric key. Okay, it has a public and private key pair that can be used for encryption or decryption and to sign or verify various different operations. Okay, so now let me use SSC S3. Okay, I don't want to manage the headache of creating a key and managing the life cycle of the key. I'll just go ahead and say create bucket. Yeah, I've just created a bucket called my RPL bucket 10th November. Okay, so now I'll just go inside the bucket. So here, if I go to properties, yeah. So if you see, encryption is enabled, right? It's enabled, and it is using the master key, which is supplied by AWS, Amazon. Okay. So now what happens is when I upload an object to this bucket, let me upload an object. I'll upload the same object. Okay. So now what happens is the moment I say upload, it'll use an API call to move the file from the disk. Okay, this is the file hello world.txt. So what it does is it basically uses an API call to copy this file from my computer to S3 over a HTTPS. Okay, so now when it transfers it over an HTTPS, it uses this certificate here, right? So it is encrypted. If you see, this is the certificate that it is going to use. S3, and it uses the certificate that is responsible for the API call, right? It's an HTTPS endpoint, API endpoint. That way, this file will get encrypted while going in the fly, while being transported. This file will get encrypted while being transmitted, and once it reaches S3, it will get decrypted and it will become like this normal. But what S3 does is it checks whether the encryption policy is enabled or disabled. If it is enabled, before it stores it to the disk, it re-encrypts that same file. Okay, the same file gets again re-encrypted using S3's server-side encryption keys, master keys, and then it gets stored in the disk at S3's end as an encrypted object. Okay, it won't be a plain text, it will be an encrypted object when it gets stored. So that way you are ensuring that you are protecting the data throughout the life cycle, right from the moment it leaves your computer till it reaches S3. On S3, before it gets stored in the disk, it again gets re-encrypted using the server-side encryption. So assume you don't have a server-side encryption enabled. In transit it gets encrypted, but once it reaches S3 and before it gets stored, it gets stored as a plain text. It does not get encrypted if you don't enable server-side encryption. Okay, that is the thing that all of you need to understand. So if you see, it's enabled here, default encryption is enabled. So the moment I say upload, okay, it's uploaded. Okay, now if you see, it's uploaded. So now on the disk, underlying disk, if you're able to somehow go to the disk and see and read the raw file from the disk, you will see that this will be encrypted. This will be the contents of the file will be in an encrypted format, which won't have the plain text in it. It will be in an encrypted format. Okay, so it's very, very important you understand this concept. If you see, it's encrypted. At a bucket level, it's encrypted, correct? So if you see server-side encryptions, it's enabled and it is using SSCS3. Okay, so now what AWS does is when I want to download this file, again the same reverse path is applicable here also. What is the reverse path? First, the API, you will invoke the API call to download this object, right? So you're just selecting this object, and when you're saying actions download, what it does is it first reads the object from the disk. When it reads the object from the disk, the the data that is stored in the disk is in an encrypted format, correct? So now when it reads it from the disk, it first reads the encrypted file. It again decrypts that file using the SSE's SSE S3, the master key. Okay, it decrypts that object. Once it decrypts that object, it takes that and then it sends it over HTTPS to your computer. Okay, because you're downloading the file, right? So now at that point in time, what happens is it again encrypts that file using SSL. Okay, and then it sends it over the wire to your computer using the internet connection that you have. Then when it comes to your computer, after it reaches your computer, the key, the public key that you have, okay, decrypts that file. Okay, because it's a key pair, right? So it basically decrypts that file, and then it gives you the file in its original shape, because the moment it is encrypted, it is distorted, right? The file gets distorted, right? You won't be able to make sense out of it. So it again decrypts that file and then it sends it back to you. That's how you're able to download the file. So now if you see, I'm downloading it. I'm just opening it using text edit. Yeah, see, I'm able to see the file as it is, right? I mean, there's no issue with my file. It's as it is. The contents are the same contents that I uploaded. But in the middle, there are so many encryptions and decryptions that are happening just to ensure that your data is protected. And if somebody with an ill intent is trying to access the data, they won't be able to access the data. Okay, so that's the whole idea of encryption and decryption. Okay, okay, all right. So that's, so now what you can also do is you can um, select the encryption as, yeah, you can edit this and you can also make this a KMS. Okay, so again in KMS, you can go with the AWS managed key, which is in this case S3's own key, or you can choose from your master keys, where if you create your own key here, right now I don't have any key, but I can just go create one key here. Just say my key, just say next, just give access to RPL admin. RPL admin, finish. My key is created. Let me just refresh this. Yeah, my key is there. You can use this key and then save changes, so that way what happens is you can also change this anytime. If you're using SSC S3, you can change this anytime from SSC S3 to KMS, where it takes some time to re-encrypt the keys, re-encrypt the data using the key that you have specified. Okay, so that's how you do encryption. Okay, it's very important you understand the concepts of encryption, so that we will wait for the session on Saturday for Z011 to come and explain us how server side, how the secure socket layers SSL works, and what is the mechanism of handshake, SSL handshake. Okay, all right. So that's one thing that I wanted to take you through today. The other one is permissions, right? Okay, so now permissions are very important in S3, right? Because so when you see permissions, what permissions that you can give in S3 is quite important. So now there are different ways in which you can secure the bucket that you have, right? One, of course, the data security, data integrity, confidentiality is something that you are handling it, uh, that you are aware of. And the data security, where in terms of encryption, you can use the server side encryption to protect your data. And anyways, your data in transit is handled by S3 through the SSL certificates that the API operations uses. Okay, in terms of giving access to the data, right? Who can read the data? Who can upload files to upload objects to the S3, or download or use those objects for their operations, right? The access control is very important. Okay, so that's where if you see, by default, all S3 buckets, objects, and related sub resources are private in nature, unless you decide to make it public. Okay, user is the AWS account or the IAM user who has access to the resource, right? In this case, I'm using RPL admin as the user, right? And I'm uploading objects to that. So RPL admin or the account is the if you open it, yeah. If you see object owner, right, which is your AWS account, has all the objects in it. Read, write, all the objects, all the permissions are there uh, with the owner, object owner. If I edit it and say that if I make the bucket public, then I'll be able to basically change this to read, public, read or write. So which is then I'm just making it as a public. Right now I can't do that because public access is blocked, because block public access settings are turned on for this bucket. So once I turn off that, I come back, then I'll be able to change this on this particular object to uh, make it publicly available. And object owner is the AWS account that uploads the objects to the bucket, not owned by the account. Okay, so object owner is the AWS account, okay, that uploads the object to a bucket. See, you can also do one thing, right? So where you can give a cross account permissions, right? So I have an account and Z011 has got an account, right? So now I'm actually giving Z011 access to one of my buckets that I have, right? When Z011 uploads the object into my account, into my S3 bucket, he gets the ownership. The AWS account that uploads the objects to a bucket, he gets the ownership for that particular object. So that way, you can actually give cross account permissions to buckets, cross bucket permissions to various different buckets, and manage the lifecycle of that. Okay, a resource owner can be an AWS account that creates the bucket, or object owns those resources. Okay, whichever AWS account that creates the bucket, or object who owns those resources. If an IAM user creates the bucket or object, the AWS account of the IAM user owns the resource. Okay, in this case, if I create a bucket or an object, my account gets access to it. If the bucket owner grants cross-account permissions to other AWS account users to upload objects to the buckets, the objects are owned by the AWS account of the user who uploaded the object and not the bucket owner, except for the following conditions, where the bucket owner can deny access to the object as it is still the bucket owner who pays for that object. Okay, he can deny the access to the object. That is possible. And bucket owner can delete or apply archival rules to the object and perform restoration, but the ownership still belongs to the owner, which is the account which has uploaded that object. Okay, so now there are two different policies that you can apply, called resource based policies and user policies. And again, the policies are very similar to what you have in your IAM. Okay, you have your IAM policies, right? We all did IAM policies last week. So these policies are also very, very similar to the IAM policies that we have seen earlier. Okay, where user-based policies use IAM. At the end of the day, it also uses IAM. Users use IAM with S3 to control the type of access a user or group of users has to specific parts of an S3 bucket that AWS account owns, that the AWS account owns. Okay, it uses IAM with S3 along with S3 to control the type of access. User-based policy is always attached to an user, group, or a role. Okay, and anonymous permissions cannot be granted on the user-based policies. It has to be an absolute user or a group or a role. If an AWS account that owns a bucket wants to grant permissions to users in its account, it can either use a bucket policy or a user policy. Okay, it can either use the bucket policy or the user policy. Okay, so now I'll come to that. Bucket policy is very, very important. I'll show you how the bucket policy works. Okay. So then you have something called resource-based policies, right? Uh, So basically, if you see the bucket policies, there are two ways in which you can actually control access to the buckets, right? So one is there's a special type of policy that is within the S3 is called resource based. Sorry, the bucket policies. The bucket policies are at a bucket level. Okay, it is very similar style of IAM. Okay, but it's only used only for S3, right? So where every bucket you can specify a bucket policy to control access to the S3 resources within that bucket. Okay, in this case, I mean, they're just showing an example of Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk is a PaaS service that AWS offers, right? In case Elastic Beanstalk would like to access your S3 bucket, you can edit the bucket policy pertaining to your Elastic Beanstalk, and you can say that, what permission your Elastic Beanstalk could actually have on your bucket. Okay, so that is something that you can specify it in the bucket policy of that pertaining of that specific bucket. Okay, so now bucket policy can be used to grant cross-account access to other AWS accounts or IAM users in other accounts for the bucket and objects in it. Okay, and bucket policies provide centralized access control to buckets and objects based on a variety of conditions, including S3 operations, requesters, resources, and all aspects of the request. Like, you can also restrict that the users coming from only specific IP addresses can access my objects. That way, what you can do is you have a bucket, right? You have an S3 bucket, and you also have some users sitting in your office. Okay, and your office has got a internet connection, right? Now, eventually, what did I say last time, right? When the request goes out, it gets natted. It goes out as a natted request. It uses the public IP address of the internet connection that your office premises has got, right? So you can whitelist that public IP address. Okay, so that only those IP addresses will be able to access the S3 buckets. No one else will be able to access. Okay, so now if an AWS account that owns a bucket wants to grant permission to users in its account, it can either use a bucket policy or a user policy. Okay, so now permissions attached to a bucket policy apply to all the objects in that bucket created and owned by the bucket owner. Okay, now it applies to all the objects that are there within that bucket. Policies can either add or deny permissions across all or subset of objects within a bucket, right? I mean, you can specify a prefix and say that, okay, this prefix, uh, you know, this specific prefix, don't give any deny permissions. Only for this prefix, deny the permissions or allow the permissions. Okay, so only the bucket owner is allowed to associate a policy with a bucket. Okay, and others can't basically modify the policies of a bucket policies. Okay, so then there is something called access control list. Okay, so now these are the two important concepts, right? Where you have bucket policies and access control list. Okay, so now what is ACL? Okay, ACL is something that we keep hearing, right? I mean, network ACL, Acls. All of us have learnt about Acls in our VPC week, right? When we learnt about VPCs, right? Where Acls are ACLs which basically allows or denies inbound or outbound at a subnet level, correct? Where you granularly you specify rules to allow or deny. Similarly, here also, this is not NACL, but this is like S3 ACLs. Okay, S3 access control list. Okay, each bucket and object has an ACL associated with it. And ACL is a list of grants identifying grantee and permission granted. Okay, it's a grant, like it's like your network ACL only, right? Where you are specifying a rule 100 with a certain rules in it, and you are basically giving either granting or denying it, correct? That way, it's a list of grants identifying grantee and permissions granted. ACLs are used to grant basic read-write permissions on resources to other AWS accounts also. Okay, if you want to give permissions to other AWS accounts, you can add the account ID and you can say read or write permissions on resources. Okay, so basically, if you see, ACLs are limited, right? In fact, ACL is slightly old style of handling access to S3 buckets. Okay, then came the bucket policies. Bucket policies are a lot more sophisticated and it's quite used. Okay, so now ACLs are limited permission sets where it cannot grant conditional permissions nor can you explicitly deny permissions. Right, you won't explicitly deny permissions for somebody, right? I mean, you have seen that you have an S3 bucket and there's one group of IAM users who are misusing it or one user who's misusing it, and you want to only deny permission only to that particular user. You can't use it using explicitly deny permissions using Acls. And it cannot be done for sub resources where you can't specify that this is the prefix where I want to deny or allow access. You can't do all of those. Okay, so now permissions can be granted to an AWS account by the email address or the canonical user ID. If the email address is provided, S3 will still find the canonical user ID for that and add it to the ACL, right? You can just use the email address or the canonical user ID to give access to a set of resources in the S3 bucket. Okay. So now in case of the bucket ACLs, so the ACLs are at two levels, right? Either it can be at a bucket level or it can be at the object level. Okay. Yeah, see, if you see here, ACL this is at a bucket level where uh, I'm the owner of this, right? And this is my canonical ID, right? So now I cannot change my public because um, and also what it said is, I'll just go back. I'll just go to properties. I'll just go to sorry permissions. I'll just go to permissions and I'll say that public access is blocked because public access settings are turned off for this bucket. To determine which settings are turned on to check your public, learn more about S3 block public access. Okay. So now I can actually go ahead and change it here using the ACL. So where it is at a bucket level, I can just go ahead and change it. Okay. So now the same thing can be applied even for the object level. If you just go back to the S3 bucket and you click on one specific object, yeah, you also have an ACL at an object level. Like it's like a thing where you get you have a folder and subfolders, right? Just open up. Okay, so you have your Windows. You just go to this PC, C drive. Okay, we have RPL lab, right? I mean, let's assume this is the bucket, right? I mean, so you when you right click and when you go to security, so you have a set of permissions at at the folder level, correct? But you also have the similar set of permissions at the file level also, which is the object level. Right? If you see, you also have it at an object level. So you can also override it at an object level, or you can specify it at the bucket level, right? So that's where if you see, this is the ACL at the object level, the object owner. Okay, so bucket ACL, only recommended use case for the bucket ACL is to grant write permission to S3 log delivery group to write access log objects to the bucket, right? Otherwise, you don't use the bucket ACL at all. You only use the bucket policies, which is a lot more robust and a lot more flexible. Bucket ACL will help grant write permissions on the bucket to the log delivery group if access log delivery is needed to your bucket, right? So, for example, you want to know who all are accessing your S3 objects, right? And you need a report of all those access log. Then you can enable access log and you can grant write permission to the S3 log delivery group to write the access log objects to the bucket. Okay, only way you can grant necessary permissions to the log delivery is via bucket ACL. Okay, that is the only use case of using a bucket ACL. Otherwise, you don't use bucket ACL at all. You only use the bucket policies. Okay, object ACL. Object ACLs control object level permissions only. Okay, it does not control the bucket level permissions. Okay, it's only at an on individual object level. Object ACL is the only way to manage permissions to an object in the bucket not owned by the bucket owner. Okay, like if the um, if the bucket owner is there, and if you want to manage the permissions to an object in the bucket which is not owned by the bucket owner, object ACL is the only way where you can manage. That is, if the bucket owner allows cross account object uploads, and if the object owner is different from the bucket owner, the only way for the object owner to grant permissions on the object is through object ACL, where the object owner can grant the account owner permissions or any other person permissions on the object, so that that object can be readable, or whatever access he gives, it is available for the other person to be accessible. Okay, if the bucket and one object is owned by the same AWS account, bucket policy can be used to manage the permissions. You don't need object ACL. Okay, you can just simply use the bucket policy, right? You don't need object ACL because bucket policy manages that. Bucket policy will be able to easily manage the life cycle of the objects, and if the object and user is owned by the same AWS account, user policy can be managed to manage the permissions. Okay, so what we can do is we will just do a quick lab around the ACLs and S3 ACLs and S3 bucket policies, right? I'm also going to give you some examples as to how bucket policies work. Okay, I want you to go through some of these, right? I mean, if you see, these are under identity and access management in the S3 public documentation. It gives very good resources around bucket owner granting its users bucket permissions, bucket owner granting cross account bucket permissions. Okay, and bucket owner granting its user permissions to objects it does not own. Okay, bucket owner granting cross account permissions to objects it does not own. So these are the four scenarios or four examples that you have, right? Okay, and it uses CLI extensively, so don't worry, we are going to look at CLI in the next week, how we can actually use CLI to, yeah, it gives you some examples also. And it uses the CLI commands to, perform some changes to the objects and changes to the object ACLs and bucket policies. Okay. So anyways, I'll just park this aside for the time being. Let's first look at the bucket policies. Okay. Okay. I'm going to the bucket, and I'm going to permissions. Okay. The first thing that you see here is block all public access settings. Okay, you can keep it blocked. That's okay. You don't need this bucket to be made public. There's something called bucket policy in the next section that you see. Okay, the bucket policy written in a JSON format provides access to the objects stored in the bucket. Bucket policies don't apply to objects owned by other accounts, right? So here, what you can do is you can just edit this and you can write some JSON IAM style code, which will allow access or deny, which will allow access to the bucket. Okay, let us see what is bucket policies are. Bucket policies and user policies are two access policy options available for granting permissions to your Amazon S3 resources. Both use JSON-based access policy language. Okay, it's an access policy language similar to what we did in IAM. Okay, so now when you write the bucket policies, you have to note very importantly that the text that you put here, right, is 20 KB in size. Okay, it can't be more than 20 KB in size. So that way you write the JSON in such a way that it does not exceed 20 KB in size. Okay, let's just go into see policies. Okay, so now if you see, uh, so a policy language, right, that JSON format that you write primarily contains all these 5 different elements. One is called resources, actions, effect, principle, and condition. Okay, these are the 5 things that it contains, right? Similar to IAM. It's actually IAM. It uses IAM behind the scenes. So it creates resources or buckets, objects, and access points, and jobs are the Amazon S3 resources. For each, you can allow or deny permissions. In a policy, use Amazon resource name to identify the resource. Actions. What action you want to give? Allow or deny by using the action keywords. Okay. For example, S3 list bucket permission allows the user to use the Amazon S3 get operation. For more information, see this. Okay. You'll see all the S3 actions here. What all actions are allowed in S3, you'll be able to see it here. Okay. Effect. Effect is, I mean, whether you want to allow or deny. Okay. S3 list bucket, you can say either allow or deny. Okay, if you do not explicitly grant access to resources, access is implicitly denied, right? So that's what IAM does, right? IAM by default denies everything. Okay, and if you have an explicit deny, it denies. If you have an explicit allow, it allows. Otherwise, it denies. So here also it's the same way. Then principle is the account or user who is allowed access to the actions and resources in the statement. In a bucket policy, the principle is the user, account, service, or other entity that is recipient of this permission. Okay, so then you have conditions. Conditions is where you can add additional conditions to your bucket policy. Okay, which says you can specify. I mean, if the prefix is so and so, right, or if the IP address is so and so, then deny. Okay, I mean, if the IP address is from so and so range, then deny access to the S3 bucket or objects. So if you see, this is basically an example of a policy, right? So there, it resembles your IAM. It's IAM at the end of the day, where you're saying allow the principal user called Dave from this account. Okay, actions are the actions that you're allowing are S3 get object, S3 get bucket location, S3 list bucket. Okay, get object is you're allowing the user to download the object, get the object, and you're allowing the user to get bucket location, which will read the metadata of that, right? I mean, get the bucket location, and you're also allowing the user to list the bucket. On resources, what resources? On AWS example bucket slash star. When you say slash star, all the objects under that bucket. If you don't give slash star, he will not have access to the objects. So it's very, very important. This is an interview question actually. They'll ask you, I have written a policy like this, but still my without this, right? I mean, assume this highlighted portion is not there in the policy. They'll say that, I mean, I have written a policy like this, but still the user Dave from this account is not able to access the objects in the S3 bucket. What could be the potential reason? Then you have to say that you have to give a slash star so that the objects do get applied as part of this IAM policy statement, right? As part of this bucket policy statement. Okay, so now let's do one thing. Let's just do a quick example of this, right? Let's do a quick example of how this works. Okay, I'm just going to write let me just copy this itself. Right, so just copy this. I'll just go paste it here within the edit bucket policy. But out here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually create one more user in my IAM. So let me just go to IAM. I'll go to users. I will just say add user. I'll just give a username. I will say I'll use the same username. What is a big deal? Dave. Dave is the username, right? Yeah. So just say Dave. Let's just keep it. Dave. Dave has got console access. I don't want programmatic access to be given to Dave. I'll just give a custom password. User need not change the password. I'll just say next permissions. um, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to I don't want to give him administrator access, but I'll just give him just only S3 access, right? I'm not going to give him anything. I'm just going to give him only S3 read-only access. I'll just give him a read-only access for S3. Review, create user. Yeah, it's created. I'll just close it. I don't need to download it because I have not created a programmatic access for him. Okay, I've created Dave as a user. Dave is created. So I'll just go back here and just use Dave. And what is the account ID of my account? Just taken the account ID here. Just put the account ID here. Yeah, and I'm only allowing access on get object, get bucket location list object on what is the R, my RPL bucket hyphen 10th November. My RPL bucket hyphen 10 November. Okay, just doing it. I'll save the changes here. Okay. Okay, I've just saved it. So let me just open one more browser. Let me log in as Dave. Dave. Yeah, I've logged in. Just navigate to S3. You just go to S3. Yeah, I'd just given the permissions to this bucket, right? Okay, so what all permissions that I've given to user Dave, I've given get object, get bucket location, and list bucket, correct? So these are the three things that I've given. So one is get object, and just see if I'm able to get object, download. Yeah, so I'm able to download the object. Yeah, so get object is there. Get object location is also there, right? I mean, if I just select this, what is the location? Get object location is also there. So then I've given list bucket. List bucket is also there. Let me just try uploading something. Add files. I'll just say I'll just create one more file here. Create hello world. I'll just say hello world 1.txt. Just create that. Just go back and upload it. Yeah, so if you see, I won't be able to I won't be able to actually upload file. Okay, so now let me just go and let me modify my bucket policy to give the permission to write an object. Okay, what is the permission for write an object? For that, if you want to know what actions, you can just go look at the documentation. um, AWS IAM actions. Just go to this. I think I gave you last time. If you go here, if you go to S3, control of S3. Yeah, S3, search for S3. So here you get S3. Yeah, so these are all the actions that are possible. It's called put object. Put object is the action. See, it's a write operation, right? So just copy this put object, come back to your console, and then just put a comma here and say S3 colon put object. Okay, so you're giving access to the put object to this user on these two buckets, on this bucket, on all the objects, right? So, and you're giving allow. This is an allow. Just save changes. Okay, so you have saved it. So let me just come back and go back to the bucket. Let me just refresh the page so that it refreshes the permission that's there. Okay, I've just refreshed the page. Going into my bucket, I'm just going to say add files. I'll just say hello world, open, and just say upload. Yeah, see, you got the upload succeeded. Okay, so that's how you do give permissions um, using your bucket policies at the bucket level. Okay, so where it's quite straightforward, where I just created a user called Dave. I gave the principal as this this ARN, right? ARN is basically of this particular user, correct? And it can be anything, right? It can be even any user. It can also be like this. I'll just give like this. This is also possible. User slash star or group, any specific group, right? You can give that. Okay, or it can be a role also. Principal can be a role. Okay, and then you are giving actions. Where do you look up actions? Actions can be looked up here. For every other this thing, you can just look up actions here. So these are all the actions that are possible for S3. So many actions are there. It's all so granular in nature. You can just get those actions and then you can give it. Okay, and these are the condition keys that you can give. Like S3 prefix. Okay, you can give a prefix to an S3, right? So when you create an object, you can just give a prefix in such a way that you can filter by that prefix. Say that, okay, like uh, like you're basically uploading certain things, right? So you want to say that, okay, if a certain user has uploaded, you can just give the user's initials as prefix. That is possible. Specifically, I want to show you one thing here. Just Yeah, tag. You can tag it actually. You can tag your objects in such a way that you can actually say that any this object which is tagged can have the user can have access to that. Okay, again, tagging is a very at an object level, you can actually tag an object. Okay, and then you can basically pass a condition in such a way that you can filter objects actions based on the tag keys that are passed in the request. Okay, so now I'll just show you some more examples of bucket policies. Yeah. Okay, so if you see, this bucket policy is giving access to a certain AWS account, of these two accounts, root of those two accounts. Action is put object and put object ACL. You're only giving access to put, not for get or anything else. Then resources, bucket name slash star. Condition, you can actually give up uh, the following example policy grants the S3 put object permissions to multiple AWS accounts and requires that any request for these operations include the public read canned ACL associated with it. Okay. Okay. So now let's do one thing. Um, if I go back to my S3 bucket, okay. So here, this is my block all public access settings, right? If I edit it and if I revoke it, but before that, I'll just show you something here. This is the ACL at the bucket level where I have the bucket owner who has got read write access on the objects and on the bucket ACL, and rest all has no access to this, right? Rest all has no access to this, right? So now what I do is I'll just go and edit it. I'll just remove this, just making this bucket public bucket. Yeah, so it has become a public bucket. Okay, so now what I can do is I can just go and edit it, saying that everyone can have read and write at an ACL level, right? I'm just say I agree. Okay, and then you can also grant other account, but I'll just go ahead and save. Everyone has got read and write list, read and write. So now if I just go to objects and I select my object and I go down to my object. Okay, in this case, so now this is basically an existing object and it has got the object owner has got a read and write. Okay, let me just go upload a new object here. Hello world on copy.txt. Okay, so if you see, this also has the same permissions, read write. Okay, but now if you want to, the bucket is by default a public bucket. It necessarily doesn't mean that the objects are public. Okay, you have to make the objects explicitly public so that they are made public. If you say make public, and just say make public, so now if you see, those objects have become public. I go back to the new object that I've created, and then I go down. If you see, it has a public read permission that is available. Okay, So that's how you can basically make use of this. Okay, granting read-only permissions to an anonymous user. You just make the principal as star, allow, effect is allow. Okay, and then you can say s3 get object, s3 get object version. So right now none of you have access to that, right? So let me actually add this. Let me actually put this there in the bucket policy. Okay, I'm just going to make my objects are all, remove the public. um, okay, let me do one thing. Let me just delete these objects. Delete. Yeah, just deleted all the objects. Let me just go back and change the permissions to revoke public access. I've just revoked public access. Yeah, I've just revoked the public access. Let me just go back to objects and let me, okay, first let me just go fix the permissions. So here in the permissions, what I'm going to do is right now I've given only access to Dave user, right? Instead of Dave user, I'm just going to give everybody. I'll just give everybody get object. That's it, only get object. Get object version. Okay. Okay, these are the two things that I'm giving to everybody. Allow start, get object version. Okay. Just made it star. Just save it. Which user is this? See, okay, so now if you see, this is where if I'm actually using star, which means that I'm allowing like public access and all that, right? That's where it checks what is the permission that this principal has got on this particular bucket, right? And do I have s3 put bucket policy action and choose? Okay, let me just come back. See, it's so beautiful, right? So where even though I'm an elevated user and I have got permissions to do many things, but they're all bounded, right? I mean, it's not like I don't have any boundaries to doing actions and using IAM and using AWS, right? There is a box. Within the box, I can do whatever I want. But the moment I step out of the box, it's going to actually throw me out saying that, hey, you don't have access to perform so and so action, right? And now you first get put policy, put bucket policy on your user, and then come back, and then you should be able to do it, right? So because I'm potentially I'm trying to do something which I'm giving every other user access to the bucket. Okay, I think that's where it is actually trying to kick me off. Okay, so let me do one thing. Let me just disable this. Okay, block let block be there. Anyone grant, which is useful when you configure a bucket as a website and want everyone to be able to read. Before you use grant read-only permissions to, you must disable block public access for your bucket. Yeah, I've disabled it. Just disable it. Just save it. Just say confirm. Just done it. So now I'll just come back here. Just edit it. Just remove these two. Yeah, I think this is fine. Get object version. Just put get object version here. Just say save changes. Yeah. So now it allows, because I had not disabled the block public access, right? with block public access, that takes the precedence. So that's why it was not allowing me to make this star, make the principal as star, because the block public access was enabled and that was taking precedence over the action that I'm trying to perform, because that is an explicit deny, correct? So that's where, IAM's beauty comes in, right? So where you have an explicit deny, which is the block public access. And now when I'm trying to basically override that explicit deny, I'm not able to override it, because allow does not override deny. Deny overrides allow. Okay. Okay. So now I've just made it that way. So now let me just go back to my user Dave. Okay. I'm just refreshing. Yeah. I'll just try and upload some file. It is supposed to throw me an error. Yes, it is throwing me an error because I don't have access. Okay. But let me just go upload objects through this user itself. I'll upload a few objects, add files, 1, 2, 3. I'll upload all the 3 files. Upload. Okay, I've uploaded it. I'll just come back and then I'll go back to the bucket. Yeah, so these files are there. Let me just try downloading one of the files. Actions download. Yeah, so it's able to download the file, because I've given access using my bucket policy to everybody. To everybody, I've given access to everybody, right? In fact, I'll just ping one of those. Let's do it anonymously. This is the object URL. I'll just copy the object URL. I'll just go here. Just open an incognito window. Yeah, so it works. I can ping you this. You can also try. It should work for you also. Yeah, it should work for you also. Okay, all right. So that's how you deal with bucket policies, right? So don't worry too much. I mean, if you don't understand it at the first instance, right, it will takes a while for you guys to kind of grasp the subject, and it's not going to be quite straightforward because it takes some time, right? I mean, all of this, especially the bucket policies, would take some time. So read through this, and but remember one thing, that it's very important you understand these concepts. And also, if you see, there are so many examples here. I can limit access to specific IP addresses. I told you, right? So you can say that in condition, you can put not an IP address, source IP, AWS source IP. Okay. You deny everything. You deny everything. Okay. Deny for all principles, all actions on these 2 buckets, except for this, except for requests coming from this particular IP address range. That's where you use conditions. Yeah, here if you see allow, okay, and condition is allow only these, allow only this IP address. Here it is not IP address. Here it is. Here you're whitelisting. Here it's a positive whitelisting. There it's a negative whitelisting. Okay, specific HTTP referrer, right? Only if your request is coming only from so and so website, allow access to the bucket. Otherwise, don't allow access to the bucket. That way, you have used your S3 objects within your website, and you want to say that if it only comes from the domain, accept the request. Otherwise, don't accept the request. Okay, like this you have so many other things as well. Okay. Okay, so now let's do one thing. Let's do one more experiment with S3. I'm just going back to my S3 management console. I'm just going to go and delete my S3 bucket. Okay, I'll just first empty it. Delete it and then I'll just go back. Just delete my bucket. Yeah, just deleted the bucket. So now there's also in S3, you can also use S3 to host your websites, static website. Like for example, you want to have a, you want to create your own blog site, okay? And you want to create a static HTML website. Okay, you are starting up a company, right? And you want to host your company's website, static website. I mean, which has got static HTML pages, which has your company's mission, what products and services that you have, whom to contact, and things like that. I mean, it's a static page, okay, like many other companies have, right? You can use S3 to create the static website. Okay. S3 static website is an impressive thing, right? So where you have the ability to just host your static content on S3, right? In fact, if you see off late, I've seen that a lot of uh, new product launches are using S3 static website. Like not only new launches, like new movies also, right? You have when new movies are launched, when they want a promotional website for their movie launches, they use S3, right? So where they don't need to actually build sophisticated systems and sophisticated data centers to host their website, right? They can just host it in S3, and S3 can scale as per demand, right? Your S3 website, whatever you've hosted, can scale as per demand. And probably a month before the movie is launched, you are hosting the website, and then a lot of hits are coming. People are all watching content for your movie trailers and teasers and things like that. People are watching it, and then once the movie is released, and after about a couple of months, I mean, the movie has become a big hit, and then the slowly uh, the the hits to your website are reducing. So in such cases, hosting it on S3 is an excellent option, because you will pay very very little, because of the the inexpensive way of the S3 that gives you. And also S3 charges you based on the number of puts and gets, correct? Where it's based on the number of writes and reads, S3 charges you, right? So from that perspective, S3 is hosting a static website on S3. It's like you are getting a URL like www.bahubali.com, right? If you say bahubali.com, and if the Bahubali's content is present in S3, if an HTML page is served out of S3, then it's basically a get, okay? And what is the cost of per get, right? It's very very cheap. So that way, you can host your website for about period of 6 months, and the bill will be very very limited, and you don't have to worry about anything, because it's a fully managed service. You don't have to worry about security, you don't have to worry about the data protection, you don't have to worry about the underlying infrastructure, you don't have to have any people maintain the underlying hardware. You only need to build your content. You only need to build your HTML static website content, host it in S3, you're done. Rest everything is taken care by AWS. Okay. So you can use Amazon S3 to host a static website. On a static website, individual web pages like static content, they might also contain client-side scripts. Okay. What is a dynamic website? Dynamic website which has the server-side code like your Java code, .NET code, and things like that, right? S3 does not support server-side scripting. It's only for hosting static website. That's it. It's an HTML page. You can host an HTML page with images, with JavaScript, uh, CSS and things like that. Okay, you can store all of that into your S3 bucket. We'll see how to create that. Okay. So I'm going to give you this link. Okay, you can just go ahead and configure this, but we will just do it right now. Okay, so now for that, just follow the step by step here, like configuring a bucket using a console where enable website hosting on that bucket. I'm just going here. I'll create a new bucket. I'm just going to say www dot. Okay, in fact, let's follow this article. Okay. When you configure a bucket as a static website, you must enable static website hosting, configure in index document, and set permissions. Sign into the console in the buckets. Choose the name of the bucket that you want to enable static hosting. Okay, in this case, you can just create a bucket. I'm just going to say www dot ssrpl.edu. Okay, that's the name of the bucket that I'm going to give. I'm just going to create it in AP South 1. And what you need to do is you need to disable the block public access, because everybody should be able to access it, right? I don't want to enable versioning. I'll just leave it. I don't want any encryption also. I'll just leave it. Let me just go ahead and create the bucket. Yeah. Okay. So I've just created a simple website called www.sssrpl.edu. Okay. I've just created that. So now what I do is I just open that. Okay. I can go to management. Sorry, in the properties, and just go to the properties, and in properties you will see static website hosting. Okay, you have to go edit it and say enable host a static website, and then hosting type is host a static website. And what is the index document? I'm just going to say index.html. Okay, and error document, just error.html. Okay, just say that and then say save changes. Okay, now if you see my website, my bucket is actually acting as a web server where I'm hosting some static HTML pages. Okay, and I'm just going to basically um, uh, put a couple of objects there which has index.html and error.html. Okay, so let's create those objects. Right now it's empty. I don't have any objects here. It's empty. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to my text and I'll just say HTML h1 hello, welcome to the SSRPL website. Just say /h1 /html. It's a very simple HTML. You can make it as complex as possible with some images and things like that. If you want, you can. I'll show you the next time. I'll show it how to create. I'm just going to create a new folder. And I'll just call it index.html. Index.html. Save it. I'll create one more for error. I'm just going to say some error.html. These are the two objects that I'm creating. I'm going to upload these objects into the bucket. I'll just say upload, add files. I'm going to upload these two objects out here. Open, and upload. So once I upload it, my bucket is public now, but my objects, are they public or not? No, they are not public as yet, right? Because I'll just go to index.html and check. It's not public, correct? I need to make my objects also public. So what I'll do is I'll just go select these two objects. I'll just go to actions. I'll just go make public. I'll just go ahead and make these two objects public. So now my objects are public and my bucket is also public. And my bucket is hosting the website with these two HTMLs for now. Okay, but it can be a complete CSS, JavaScript, and everything, right? I mean, it can have everything in it. Okay, so and if I go to properties, if I go to the end, it has a static website hosting enabled. So now, how do I access it, right? How do I browse my website? It also gives me a URL for my website. If you see, this is the URL that I'm getting for my website. I'll just simply open this URL in another browser and then hit, yeah, see, it actually gives me, it serves my HTML content from my S3 bucket. Okay, I'm going to ping you that URL. You can also try that. I'm going to ping that URL that I got. Okay, and you can basically browse this website, and it's just going to throw me the HTML page whatever I've created. Okay, give me a second. Let me bring you some more examples around hosting JavaScripts, hosting I mean hosting a website which has got JavaScript images and all of that. Isn't it cool? I mean, isn't it interesting? So basically you can just, now as students, you can also host your own website. You can host your blog site. There's so many examples available.
Can we change the URL, sir?
You can change the URL. So in order to change the URL, what you need to do is you need a domain name. Okay, you need a domain name for to change the URL, and you need to point your DNS record to point to this particular URL that I just gave. Okay, like if you bought a domain in GoDaddy, right? If you go to GoDaddy or even Route 53 offers domain registration. Okay, so now for example, domain name I want to buy sssrpl.edu, right? Now I can point this URL. This is anyways a public facing URL. In DNS, there's something called CNAME. You can create a CNAME and you can point your sssrpl.edu to point to this particular S3's URL. So that way you can just change the URL to have sssrpl.edu. I'll tell you how to do that.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so okay, I'm just going to share my screen back. I just found something online, just a free template. Okay, I just found something in online, just a free template, which provides us a website, a complete website. It has got images in it. Okay, it has got some images. It has got some CSS. It has got some JavaScript. Right? It has a JavaScript. Right? It has got CSS styles in it. A framework.css. Right? It has got some default page. index.html, and it has got some basic pages and things like that, right? I just downloaded this. If I just open this index.html, this is the website. This is a static website, but right now it is coming from my local file, that local thing. But now let me just put this in S3. Okay, I'm just going. This is the Wavefire is the complete folder. I just downloaded this Wavefire free website template from freecss.com. Okay, I'm just going to, these are the contents, these are the assets that the website belongs to. You can modify this and you can do, I mean, if the license is allowed, you can do all of that. I'm just going to show you an example. That's it. Now let me just go back to my S3 management console. Right now, what I've done is I've just uploaded a very simple HTML index page, right? Let me just delete these two. So delete. Okay, I've just deleted these two objects. I'm just going to upload my other one here. Okay, I just say upload, add files, RTL sample Wavefire. So this is what I've uploaded. Okay, so let me first upload these two files, license and index. Yeah, I've uploaded, and I'll just add those folders, all these folders. I've uploaded this folder. Layout. Excuse me. Yeah, I've uploaded these folders. Let me just go ahead and upload it. Okay, it's all uploaded. Let me just go back. Yeah, so I have all of these files, index.html, like similar to how I have here, images, index.html, license.txt, layout, pages, images. All of this is present here. What I need to do is I just need to go make them public. I just select everything. I just make them public. Yeah, just make everything public. Let it complete. Yeah, there are a total of 50 objects. All the 50 objects have been made public. Okay, so now if I go back to my properties, if I get the URL, I just copy this URL. I just go back to my browser. Okay, I already have it. Let me just refresh it. Yeah, you see, the entire website is running out of S3 now. Okay, now if you want to run it, you were actually running this locally earlier, right? This was running locally. Instead of running locally, you're running it out of S3. The same. You're just running it out of. If you refresh it, you'll also see this at your end. Okay, you will see that this is actually running it locally. So running it out of S3. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, in fact, I've got a domain registered for myself. Okay, I'm going to use my domain right now. Okay, just give me a second. Let me point this to my domain, and then I'll show you how I'm able to point this to my domain, and then it's able to serve the website through. Somebody was asking, can we change the URL? Yes, you can definitely change the URL, right? I'm just going to show you that right away. But for that, you need to have a domain, right? In fact, I've got a domain. Okay, that's my domain. So it's just a simple thing. Right now, it's pointing to something else. I was just doing some blog.allwithinspace.com is my domain. I'm going to change my blog.allwithinspace.com to point to my S3, point to this S3, so that when I come back and refresh my blog.allwithinspace.com, it'll actually point to my this content which is being served from here. Okay, so let's do that. I'll come back. I'm going to stop share for a while so that I log into my account. Just going to make some DNS record changes so that I point my thing to come here. Okay. I'm just going to use Route 53. I just logged into my another personal account that I have. Here, just stay with me for a second. Okay, I will share my screen back. Okay, so I have another account. I just have a Route 53 configured there, right? I mean, I've got a hosted zone. We'll come back to Route 53 at a later point in time. Route 53 is a DNS service like GoDaddy, right? Which provides a DNS service, right? Like that, Route 53 also provides a DNS service. So I've got allwithinspace.com here, right? So right now, if you see, my website is running out of this one, right? I mean, right now my blog.allwithinspace.com is pointing to my website, right? But it's a sample website that I've built. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically point that blog.allwithinspace.com, or I can actually create a new one, right? I can just create a new one. I just create a new record that says rpl.allwithinspace.com, right? I'll just point rpl.allwithinspace.com to point to. I'll say triple s rpl.allwithinspace.com. I want it to point to another C name. Okay, record type is I want it to be C name. Alias. Yeah. Okay, that I want to make it point to my this URL. Copy link location. Just come back here. Just put it here. Okay, it's SSS RPL.all within space. Right now it does not exist, right? You want to check that? We can check it. SSS RPL dot all within space.com. It does not exist right now, right? Because there's no such record exists on the internet. I'm just going to create that. I'll just create the record. Okay, yeah, record is successfully created where I have my SSS rpl.allwithinspace.com is pointing to my S3 bucket, which I've just created, right? So where I'm hosting it as a website. So now let me just go and refresh this. Okay, you just have to wait for the records to be propagated for some time. Yeah, so let's just wait for, because it's 300 seconds, right? So 5 minutes it will take for the records to be propagated globally. Okay, let's just give it some time and come back and see that it should work. Just see whether it is propagated or not. Triple S RPL dot. Okay, I think it's propagated. Okay, let's just give it some time. It should come back. It should come back and point my domain to that particular website where I have just close this. Come back. Okay, I'll just go back. I mean, this is where or there's one more way to kind of make that to quickly work. One sec. Dot bucket. Just remove public access settings. upload, just go add files, fire files, layout, load, add folder, pages, upload, uploaded, go back, options, public, made public, just go back and make it a static website hosted. Yes, edit, enable, host a static website, HTML, .html, just say save changes. Yeah, so it's type this. Okay, so sometimes what happens is, I mean, when you are posting, when you're tying it with your domain name, it actually checks for this host header, rpl.all within space.com. Okay, so I think probably that is the reason why it is not able to resolve the DNS properly. Okay, so this is done. Permissions are there. Bucket policy is okay. It's all good. It's all looking good. So now I can actually go. Yeah, it works fine. So let me go to my record. I'll update my record in such a way that it points to the new one. Edit record. I'll just replace it with rpl dot all within space.com. Okay, I'm just going to make it 5 seconds. Save changes so that it gets propagated quickly. The DNS record would get propagated quickly. Yeah, rpl.all within space.com.s3. Yeah, perfect. So now let me just come back. rpl.all within. Okay, wait. Let's wait for the propagation to happen. Propagation to complete. So then it should work. Okay, I'm just going to go back and delete the other one. This one I'm just going to first empty this, say permanently delete. It's done. So then just come back. Just say delete. Delete bucket. Yeah, it's deleted. So right now I have only one bucket here, and the bucket has got permissions, which has disabled all block all public access. So it means that it can be accessed publicly, right? And then I've got properties. Under properties, I've got static website hosting enabled, and it is listening on so and so endpoint. So if you directly click this endpoint, it will open up the website, or you can also point this endpoint to your DNS record in the form of a CNAME so that you can come through your DNS record as well. Okay, if you have a domain, you can just try it out. Okay, that's possible. And then I've also made all the objects public in this, right? So that way, if you just open one of the objects, license.txt, if you go down, public is public read. Okay, so that anybody can read this. And it's actually serving the website from my okay, let's just wait. I think there seems to be some DNS issue, but yeah, it should work actually. Okay, so now that's the power of S3, and now a lot of organizations, a lot of, like as I said, in fact, recently I was reading through one of the an article where some blockbuster movie had actually used S3 to host their static website during the promotion period, because as per them, to create a new website and host it, if they have to spin off the infrastructure by themselves, their estimate was somewhere around $200,000, okay, which is $2 lakh. But then eventually, when they preferred to go with S3 and host their website and S3, and eventually when they got the bill after about say 3 or 4 months, their bill was hardly $1,500, okay, which is like 100th, right? Originally their estimate was about $200,000, and then eventually when they got the bill, after they chose to go with S3 to host their static website, their bill was very less. It was about some $1,500 or so. So that was the benefit that they got. Okay, because S3 is scalable, right, and it's very cheap. And if say suddenly my number of hits to my website increases, S3 also scales its infrastructure so that the website that is hosted within my S3 also scales accordingly. Okay, all right. So let's do one thing. Okay, by the way, this website that I got was like this one, some free CSS, free-css.com. So you can just go to this free CSS, and there are so many free CSS templates which you can try out. Of course, there's some license regulations that would be there. You'll have to abide and respect the licenses regulations, that license terms that is provided by this. But this is where I downloaded it from. I just went to Wavefire, the first one. I just went here and then I just downloaded that Wavefire template, which is an HTML5 responsive 4 column template, dark on light template. And then I just downloaded that and I just used it to, host my website. That's all I did. Okay. There seems to be some issue. I'll have to troubleshoot this and see why it's not working. I'll get it working and show you tomorrow. I'll get this DNS part working and show you tomorrow.
It's working for me, sir.
Is it
I'm
working for
getting
you
yes, sir.
with this triple S RPL?
Uh,
Dot all within space.com. Does that work? My domain?
it worked earlier. Now it's taking long time. Now
Okay. No,
yeah,
this
it's working, sir. It's working.
it's working. Okay. Probably then my internet connection is behaving a bit weird. Ah, it's working. Actually, I'm trying from my mobile. It's working. Yeah. So triple S RPL dot all within space.com is working. Actually, it's working. Yes. Okay. Let me just try from my Windows box. Oh yeah, it's actually working. Yes, the DNS propagation happened. Maybe in my case, I don't know. Probably it's my geo. I have a geo connection. Probably the DNS records have not been propagated well. But yeah, it's working. See, triple S RPL dot all within space.com is actually working, and it's pointing to my website. If I want, I can add a certificate to this. Right, I can install a certificate and I can make this HTTPS. But S3 website hosting does not support SSL termination on the S3. You have to have a CloudFront. That's going to be our tomorrow's topic. CloudFront is going to be our tomorrow's topic, right? The same website, whatever we created today, we will put it through CloudFront tomorrow. CloudFront is a CDN service. We can actually put it in CloudFront and I'll demonstrate it to you. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, it's actually working. Yes, correct. You're right. It's working. Okay, so cool. So now let's come back. I'm just going to give you some links for today, and you can try the S3 website hosting. If you have your GoDaddy domains, who has got a GoDaddy domain or any domain? Raise your hands. Nobody has a GoDaddy domain? Okay, no worries. That's okay. You don't need to have a domain. I mean, I just bought a domain. I'm having this domain for a long time, right? I mean, I like space so much, right? And I'm a fan of space. So that's why I went ahead and I took the grabbed the all within space domain for myself. Okay. In fact, I'm paying GoDaddy, right? In fact, there was some offer with GoDaddy some 3-4 years back, and then I just went and bought this domain. I'm using that for all my, test and you know, experimentation purposes. In fact, shortly I'm going to have my blog site rolled out. I'm still working on my blog site, my personal blog site. I will shortly roll out my blog site on blog.allwithinspace.com. Right now it's empty. You don't see any content there, but it'll be live shortly. Okay, cool. So now let's get back to our business. Let's go to the material. I'm just going to go to uh, 10th November. Just give you some assignments. Perform those assignments. Then you should all be good. 10th November S3 advanced topics. Yeah, so the first one that I want you to do is I want you to look at encryption, right? So now go to the blog site from the gentleman Jayendra Patil, data protection. S3 data protection. Yeah. See through this. So then under security, data protection, just see through this. Okay, data encryption and data protection. I want you to read through the server side encryption and client side encryption. Okay. That's one. And also the next topic that I spoke about today was on the bucket policies, right? Yeah, identity and access management in S3. Read through this. Read through this, and more importantly, read about the bucket policies. That is the most important topic. You can try out some examples there in bucket policies, right? You can just try out these bucket policy examples. Okay, this is a very simple policy. You can just try this policy. Okay, and also yeah, this one S3 actions, right? Yeah, you can try this policy, this bucket policy. Do this as an assignment for today. Okay. Okay, and then also looked at S3 static website hosting. Hosting a static website on Amazon S3. Okay, you will get a lot of videos, YouTube videos on this. Assignment for 10th November is I'm not going to give you descriptive steps around that. So you can just replay the video. Okay, S3 bucket policies. Okay. Try out creating bucket policies and provide control access to other users. Okay, you can use this policy. Yeah, you can use this policy actually. other users. But before that, before this, create a new IAM user with console access and permissions, and attach a direct policy. Attach a direct policy during user creation as S3 read only. S3 read only policy will be there. So just attach that policy so that at least user will be able to log in and go into S3. Okay, and then you can use this. Use this. Give your account number here and give your username here. Okay, and then your bucket name here. Okay, and then you can give. So once you create the user, okay, replace the account ID and username and the bucket name as highlighted below. Okay, once you do this, and then again go back and then refresh the page, then you'll be able to put objects into that bucket as this user, as the other user. Okay, so try that and then read through the documentation which I've given pasted above all of this bucket policies, and then try out different policies, right? And you have to just keep experimenting on those bucket policies. Then try to host a static website by following the steps here. Steps article. Yeah, hosting configuring a bucket, enable hosting, follow these steps. Okay, just follow these steps. Configuring an index document. Okay, and once you get that, use the S3 static website endpoint URL from the properties tab and browse. Yeah. Tips. Ensure you make your bucket public and all the objects public. That's a tip. Okay. Okay, cool. So I think so tomorrow we are going to look at CloudFront. CloudFront is again an important topic. I'm going to we'll extend the same website that we created, but we will present it using CloudFront, because you'll know that CloudFront is even more secure, right? You'll know that how CloudFront helps making your website global. Okay, you can go global in minutes. Okay, and users in US will be able to access your website with the same amount of latency, right? I mean, the users in the US won't will not see a huge latency while accessing your website through CloudFront. So that is the beauty of CloudFront. But before that, I'm going to introduce you to some concepts around content distribution, right, and CDN. Okay, I've sent the assignment for today, so please read through these concepts and perform these two assignments for today on bucket policies and static website hosting. And I'll see you all tomorrow, and we can continue with our CloudFront. That's going to be a very, very interesting topic tomorrow. Okay, all right. Thanks all for joining. See you all tomorrow. Sairam.